Ukraine has allies, and those allies have provided it with weapons that not only devastate Russia's forces, but cost Putin billions of dollars in equipment losses. HIMARS, or High Mobility Artillery Rocket System, is one of those weapons. Its combination of pinpoint accuracy and devastating firepower has forced Russia to sacrifice enormous amounts of its equipment and people. How much? A staggering $1 billion worth of Russian weapons, and maybe more, have fallen victim to HIMARS strikes in 2024 alone. And even 3 years into his special military operation, Putin still hasn't figured out how to destroy these systems consistently, leaving Ukraine to run rampant with strikes that devastate Russia's army. So what is the HIMARS? Why is it so devastating to Russia? And why has Putin failed to take out the majority of these superb artillery systems? To answer those questions, we first need to get a little background on how many HIMARS Ukraine has and what these systems are capable of achieving. On January 1, 2024, Forbes military writer David Axe claimed that Ukraine has 39 portable HIMARS systems, capable of firing GPS-guided 227mm rockets at Russian targets. Germany bought 3 more of them for Ukraine a couple of months later, bringing the total to 42. Axe hailed the artillery system as being among the best in Ukraine's arsenal and revealed a shocking point. Though Ukraine had used these systems for almost 2 years, Russia had failed to take out a single one by the beginning of 2024. That would later change, but the point still stood. Russia knew that Ukraine had its hands on these dangerous weapons and it was desperately trying to destroy them. But with each failed strike came the loss of millions of dollars of Russian weaponry. Moscow would expend ammo trying to take out a HIMARS only to see it all go to waste when it missed. And those misses left the HIMARS free to launch its own attacks, with its barrages taking out everything from Russian troops and artillery to multi-million-dollar aerial defense systems. It's chipped away at Moscow's stockpiles, with each HIMARS attack costing Russia millions while its soldiers and drones desperately try to gather information about the artillery system's positions. And even when that information is gathered, the HIMARS has often been moved on from its previous placement, often under the cover of camouflage, so that it's ready to strike again. Make no mistake about it, Putin hates HIMARS. And you'll understand exactly why when you learn a little more about this powerful weapon. The HIMARS is an American-made weapon developed by Lockheed Martin and BAE Systems. The former is responsible for the artillery system itself, with the latter building the vehicle upon which the HIMARS is transported. That vehicle clues you to the fact that HIMARS is a portable artillery system that can be driven around, making it easy for Ukraine to transport it, position it, and then move it out of harm's way after it's conducted its strike. Lockheed Martin developed the weapon in 1996 with the concept of creating a mobile, multiple-launch rocket system, or MLRS. The weapon's purpose is multifaceted. It can engage and defeat opposing artillery, as Ukraine has so ably proven during its fight against Russia, along with being capable of destroying air defense systems, personnel carriers, and supply depots. HIMARS launches its barrage of rockets before being moved away from the launch location at high speeds, forcing the enemy to scramble in a desperate and often failed attempt to locate it. In design, HIMARS is similar to the M270 MLRS, with the weapon itself using the same pods used in the M270, though it only carries one pod compared to the M270's pair. That's a purposeful choice, as only having one pod makes HIMARS light enough to be portable, meaning a sacrifice to firepower is made to enable the weapon to conduct multiple strikes without the enemy finding its position. HIMARS has proven versatile enough to be fired from sea. In October 2017, the US Marine Corps fired a HIMARS rocket from the deck of an amphibious transport vessel, the USS Anchorage, successfully striking a target on land. Ukraine isn't able to utilize this powerful naval capacity against Russia, but there's plenty more about HIMARS that makes it Ukraine's best artillery system. Each HIMARS carries and is capable of launching a 6-pack of rockets, with its armaments extending from standard MLRS rounds to the entire MLRS range of ammunition. This includes short-range practice rockets, giving Ukraine an opportunity to get familiar with the system, and extended-range MLRS rockets. HIMARS is also capable of firing extended-range GMLRS rockets, achieving a range of 43.4 miles in the process, and is even capable of firing deep into Russian territory from Ukraine thanks to HIMARS's compatibility with the ATACMS tactical missile. That missile has a range of 186 miles, making it viable for Ukraine to position its HIMARS on the front lines, fire into Russia, then get out of dodge before Putin's troops even realize what's happening. These rockets are also guided by GPS, allowing them to strike precisely on a target rather than taking the scattershot approach used by most Russian artillery systems. Where those rockets land at an approximate location and fragment, with Russia simply hoping they'll cause damage, a HIMARS-launched rocket hits its target the majority of the time. Not only does this aid Ukraine in terms of being more effective at taking out Russian equipment, but it also means fewer rockets are needed to destroy a target. The majority of the HIMARS protection comes from its superior mobility, especially when compared to Russia's artillery systems. But if it does happen to come under fire, it has protective systems that allow it to take a battering. The crew cabin, for instance, is built using armor plating that protects the 3 soldiers needed to operate the HIMARS from small arms fire and artillery fragments. The armor plating won't withstand a direct hit from an artillery shell, but it provides enough protection for the HIMARS crew to allow them to escape if the weapon comes under fire. Speaking of the crew, the HIMARS cabin accommodates a gunner, a driver, and a section chief or launch commander. Their roles are self-explanatory. Each crew member has access to an internal communication system, allowing them to receive orders from and feedback information to Ukrainian forces stationed nearby. But it will always be HIMARS mobility that puts it a cut above most other artillery systems, especially anything that Russia can field. The 5-ton truck used to transport the launcher has an Allison 3700 SP transmission and a Caterpillar C7 engine that enable it to reach a maximum speed of 52.8 miles per hour. It can maintain that speed for almost 300 miles, making the truck vital in Ukraine's strategy of getting in, launching rockets, and getting out again. Speaking of getting in, the truck-based launching system also means that HIMARS is capable of being deployed in areas that simply aren't available to the majority of heavy ground-based artillery systems. Add a self-loading autonomous system into that mix, and you get an artillery system capable of rattling off multiple volleys of rockets quickly before moving on to the next target. So it's clear by now that HIMARS is an impressive weapon. But how has Ukraine used it to destroy around $1 billion of Russian equipment? To answer that question, we only need to look at a few of the strikes Ukraine has carried out with its American-made artillery system in 2024 alone. Starting on January 2nd, the same month David Axe wrote about Russia's struggles with destroying HIMARS, Newsweek reported on a strike that showcases why Putin wants these dangerous weapons off the battlefield. Ukraine successfully used HIMARS to destroy a Russian Buk M2 air defense system in the highly contested region of Donetsk. That aerial defense system is capable of striking at medium range, making it well suited to destroying Ukraine's drones and missiles. But it couldn't do anything about the HIMARS attack. Footage of the strike shows the Buk M2 in transit and within the sights of what appears to be a Ukrainian drone. As that drone shoots footage, it's likely sending detailed target information to the HIMARS. After a few seconds, explosions light up the road on which the Buk M2 is traveling, signaling a successful strike. Each of these Buk M2s cost around $30 million for Russia to make. Losing just one takes its eyes out of the sky, leaving Ukraine's drones and even its growing fleet of F-16s free to fly without worrying about incoming aerial defenses. There's much more. Around 6 months after this Buk M2 strike, Ukraine was targeting Russia's aerial defenses again. Only this time, it was taking advantage of HIMARS' long-range capabilities to attack an air defense installation in the Russian city of Belgorod. That installation was home to multiple S-300 and S-400 surface-to-air missile systems, with photos from the aftermath of the attack showing multiple vehicles and air defense systems on fire and belching smoke into the air. Russia, as it always does, threatened revenge on both Ukraine and the United States for allowing the use of HIMARS in Russia. I would like to warn American leaders against miscalculations that could have fatal consequences, warned Moscow's Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Rybakov. For unknown reasons, they underestimate the seriousness of the rebuff they may receive. No rebuff came, at least against the United States. All Russia could do was sit back and watch as some of its prized aerial defense systems go up in smoke. We don't know how many S-300s and 400s this HIMARS strike destroyed, but we do know that a single S-400, along with a battery of its missiles, costs Russia $500 million, with S-300s costing between $120 and $150 million back in 2010. No matter which the HIMARS hit, and it could have hit both and several of each, that's hundreds of millions of dollars of Russian equipment destroyed in a single attack. July brought with it news of yet another successful HIMARS strike. Once again, using the now tried and tested method of having a drone locate a target before that asset is destroyed by HIMARS, Ukraine had a Pantsir S-1 anti-aircraft gun and missile system in its sights. Housed in a Russian complex about 18.5 miles south of Donetsk, the system was supposed to provide support for Russian forces on the ground as they tried to push into eastern Ukraine. It won't be able to do that anymore. Ukraine's Shadow Aerial Reconnaissance Unit located the Pantsir S-1 and delivered its coordinates to a HIMARS artillery unit. A pair of missiles were fired off, with the first damaging the anti-aircraft gun while the second set the entire weapons system on fire. Footage from the incident shows the Pantsir S-1's crew evacuating and trying to flee the blaze as they make their way back to their positions. Each of these Pantsir S-1 systems costs Russia a touch under $15 million, another big equipment blow caused by HIMARS. More attacks against Russian aerial defenses came in October 2024. This time, Ukraine turned its attention back toward Russia's prized Buk defense systems. Only this time, it wasn't the Buk M2. Ukraine hit the Buk M3. As with the January strike, drone footage of the incident shows us what happened. The Buk M3 appears to be stationed in a field. Ukraine has clearly spotted it, likely with the help of drones again, and launched a series of targeted HIMARS rockets at the Buk's location. Those missiles are seen striking the aerial defense system, which explodes in the same shower of bright sparks seen in the January attack, casting plumes of smoke around the wreckage of the weapon. This particular version of the Russian air defense system is a little less costly than the Buk M2, with Russia spending around $50 million on each one. Still, that's tens of millions of dollars more damage being caused by HIMARS attacks. If you're keeping a running total, that means $150 million in Buk aerial defense systems lost and at least $650 million of S-300 and S-400 systems, assuming Ukraine only hit one of each in its Belgorod attack. Add the $15 million for the lost Pantsir S-1, and that puts us at around $815 million in 2024 alone from just a handful of attacks. Potentially more if Ukraine took out multiple S-300s and S-400s in Belgorod. Maybe $1 billion is an underestimate. Fast forward to November 2024 and Ukraine was at it again. Only this time, it wasn't targeting Russia's aerial defenses with HIMARS. It was taking out Russian soldiers. In a strike that demonstrated the versatility of Ukraine's mobile artillery system, Kyiv launched what Forbes writer David Axe called a ruthless double-tap barrage by Ukrainian rockets that may have killed or wounded dozens of Russian troops in southern Ukraine's Zaporizhia Oblast. The attack was initiated by a drone carrying out reconnaissance, which spotted a group of Russian soldiers huddled around their vehicles. Ukraine responded to the find by launching a trio of M30-31 rockets from their HIMARS, decimating the group. It then waited to see if any survived. When it became clear that some Russian soldiers had, as an evacuation team arrived, Ukraine launched a fourth rocket to take them out completely. Axe says the attack killed or wounded dozens of Russian soldiers. If we start at the low end of the scale, we can assume dozens means at least 24. According to United 24, Russia is now spending as much as $20,000 on one-time enlistment payments for its soldiers, in addition to paying them between $2,000 and $5,000 per month. A new Russian recruit apparently has a 1-month life expectancy, according to Forbes, which makes the maths here fairly simple. If we assume a mid-range for the salary of $3,500 and add the $20,000 enlistment payment, each soldier costs Russia $23,500 per month. Multiply that by 24 and you get a HIMARS strike that took out $564,000 worth of Russian spending in an instant. But there are caveats. There may have been more than 24 soldiers. Dozens could imply anywhere between 24 and 96 troops before we get into the hundreds range. Those soldiers also had to be equipped with weapons, which would also have been destroyed. And, as Axe mentions in his Forbes article, the dozens of Russian soldiers were also crowded around vehicles, which were also likely destroyed in the HIMARS attack. Militani provided more details about the attack, claiming that it likely struck a cluster of between 30 and 40 Russian soldiers, with at least 20 being left dead and more wounded. So let's bump those soldier losses up to 40, which brings us to a cost of $940,000. The second strike in the double tap also likely took out a truck, 5 civilian vehicles, and a Russian evacuation team, easily bringing the total cost to Russia to over $1 million. Small potatoes compared to the far more devastating, to Russia's military bank balance, HIMARS attacks on aerial defense systems, but still an attack that chips away at Russia's equipment levels and demonstrates HIMARS' effectiveness. And it just keeps getting worse for Russia throughout 2024. HIMARS' precision strike abilities have also allowed it to essentially assassinate several major Russian military figures. On December 27th, the Express reported that one of these strikes, again carried out with the help of reconnaissance drones, killed 3 officers of Russia's 135th Motorized Rifle Regiment. Ukraine's main director of intelligence, or GUR, explained the attack. GUR employees obtained information about a planned meeting with the participation of officers of the command of the 4th Guards military base of the Russian occupation forces, who are participating in the criminal war against Ukraine in the Zaporizhia region. After checking and confirming the data, military intelligence officers developed an operation plan. That plan saw several Ukrainian special forces groups, including the SBS and SBU, work together to coordinate a HIMARS strike that killed the officers and destroyed their vehicles. It's difficult to place an exact dollar figure on how much this strike cost Russia. The 3 officers killed were likely higher paid and better equipped than standard infantry, making their loss strategically significant. Additionally, Ukraine destroyed multiple vehicles in the attack, causing direct financial losses of at least $100,000. However, the greater impact may have been operational, According to reports on previous Ukrainian HIMARS strikes, the loss of key personnel in Russian units has at times led to command disruptions and less effective battlefield coordination. While it's difficult to estimate a precise cost, similar past instances have resulted in higher equipment and personnel losses due to poorly coordinated counterattacks. All of this brings us to nearly $1 billion worth of damage caused by HIMARS attacks in 2024 alone. Bear in mind that Ukraine has had this powerful weapons system since 2022. We haven't even mentioned any attacks from that year or 2023, meaning it's easy to assume that Ukraine has destroyed well over $1 billion of Russia's valuable military equipment and its soldiers since the beginning of Putin's special military operation using HIMARS. GPS-guided precision wins out against Russia's hit-and-hope artillery approach time and time again. We conclude with a final question. Why hasn't Putin made destroying these Russia-draining mobile artillery systems a priority? Well, he has. It's just that he's been mostly unsuccessful in taking out any of the HIMARS Ukraine is using against him. Much of the reason for that comes down to what we've discussed already about the HIMARS. It's a highly mobile system that can be moved from place to place easily. By the time Russia identifies where a strike came from, the HIMARS is usually already on the move and out of the range of Russian artillery response. And even if the system stays in place long enough for Russia to attack with its own artillery, that's often not enough. Again, it's the precision versus scattershot approach. Most of Russia's artillery can only strike in the general area around the HIMARS while hoping for a direct hit. If that hit doesn't come, the HIMARS vehicle has the armor we mentioned earlier to deflect artillery fragments away from its crew. Still, Putin keeps on trying. After 2 years, he finally found success, but only a couple of times. March 2024 saw Russia manage to use a drone to track a HIMARS moving along the tree line of a road in Nikhanarivka, about 25 miles away from the front lines in Donetsk. Rather than rely on inaccurate artillery, Russia used a precise hypersonic Iskander to hit the HIMARS, setting it on fire. That was a big loss for Ukraine. But it's also more dollars added to Russia's losses due to HIMARS. Each one of those Iskander missiles costs Russia around $3 million, meaning it's losing money even when it manages to take out one of Ukraine's valuable artillery units. Russia found more success in July 2024 with a strike that destroyed 4 of Ukraine's HIMARS units. That's according to TASS, which is a state-owned Russian news agency and thus may be vulnerable to spreading propaganda, which says that the Russian attack also killed up to 35 foreign specialists in Ukraine to maintain the HIMARS systems, along with the 4 HIMARS themselves. So Russia is finally coming close to solving its HIMARS problem. But by now, the damage is done. Nearly 3 years has seen HIMARS cause well over $1 billion of damage to Russian weapons, equipment and people. In fact, the few attacks from 2024 we've discussed in this video came close to hitting that number, and may have exceeded it if we consider the indirect effects of Ukraine taking out so many Russian soldiers, officers and aerial defense systems. HIMARS is clearly valuable to Ukraine. But what do you think about this powerful precision artillery system? Should Ukraine's Western partners send more HIMARS so Ukraine can bleed Russia's military dry financially? Will Putin figure out how to get rid of the rest of Ukraine's HIMARS? Share your thoughts in the comments, and thank you for watching the video. Now go and check out Ukraine's perfect ambush, Russia falls into HIMARS kill zone, or click this other video instead.